Everyone thought I was the naive little runner-up who smiled politely while watching a cheater steal my crown. They had no idea I was already 3 moves ahead, setting the perfect trap that would expose his lies to the entire school administration. By graduation day, I wasn't just valedictorian. I was the architect of the most legendary academic takedown in our school's history. My name is Jessica Chen, and I should have been valedictorian from day one. For 4 years, I watched Marcus Wheeler glide through Westfield High like he owned the place. Golden boy, star quarterback, honor roll student, the kind of guy who made teachers blush when he turned in papers late with that devastating smile and a perfectly crafted excuse about family emergencies or college visits. What they didn't see was what I saw. I noticed things. I always had. It started sophomore year during AP History when Marcus turned in an essay about the Industrial Revolution that used the exact same obscure source citations as a paper I'd found online 3 days earlier. Word for word. Even the same typo in Pittsburgh. I brought it to Mrs. Henderson after class, my hands shaking as I laid out the evidence. She barely glanced at the papers before handing them back with a dismissive wave. "Jessica, dear, you need to focus on your own work instead of policing others. Marcus is a very bright student." Bright. Right. Junior year brought more of the same. Marcus would mysteriously know exactly which sections of reading would be on pop quizzes. He'd have answers to lab experiments before we even started them. His group projects were always suspiciously well-researched, with contributions that seemed way beyond his usual capabilities. The breaking point came during our senior year AP Literature class. We'd been assigned to write original poetry for our final portfolio, 20% of our grade. I'd spent weeks crafting a series of pieces about immigrant identity and the generational gaps in my family. Real, raw stuff that came from my bones. 2 days before the deadline, I was in the library computer lab when I saw Marcus's screen. He was on a poetry forum, copying and pasting verses into a Word document. Not just any verses, award-winning pieces from a small literary magazine that had folded 3 years ago. Obscure enough that most teachers wouldn't recognize them, but sophisticated enough to impress. I watched him work for 20 minutes, building his entire portfolio from stolen words. This time, I didn't go to the teacher first. I went straight to Mr. Davidson, our AP coordinator, with screenshots and printed evidence. I had URLs, timestamps, everything. Davidson listened patiently, nodded at all the right moments, then delivered the same crushing blow. "I understand your concerns, Jessica, but Marcus has been consistently excellent all year. Sometimes similar themes emerge in student work. I'm sure it's just coincidence." Coincidence. 4 years of coincidences. That night, I sat in my bedroom staring at my class rank. Number 2. Always number 2. By 0. 0 points. Marcus wasn't just stealing individual assignments. He was stealing my entire future. Valedictorian came with a full scholarship to state. It came with the graduation speech, the recognition, the respect I'd earned through 4 years of 18-hour days and perfect attendance. But more than that, he was stealing from everyone. Sarah Martinez, who stayed up until 3 a.m. writing her own poetry only to watch Marcus's plagiarized work get praised. David Kim, who actually did the research Marcus was claiming credit for. Every honest student in our school was getting robbed. I made a decision that night. If the teachers wouldn't listen to evidence, I'd create evidence they couldn't ignore. The plan started simple and grew more elaborate as I thought it through. Marcus had a system. He got information from somewhere. I needed to figure out his network. I started by watching, really watching. I mapped his routine, his friend groups, his habits. Marcus ate lunch with the same crew every day. Tyler Brooks, his best friend and fellow cheater, Ashley Romano, student council president and Tyler's girlfriend, and Megan Foster, Marcus's on and off girlfriend who seemed to worship the ground he walked on. I noticed that Marcus never seemed stressed before big tests. While the rest of us crammed and panicked, he'd be laughing in the hallway, making plans for the weekend. Either he was naturally brilliant, which his original work proved he wasn't, or he had a system. The breakthrough came during lunch on a Wednesday in March. I was sitting 3 tables away, close enough to hear but far enough to stay invisible. Ashley was complaining about the upcoming AP government exam. I swear, if Mr. Peterson asks about the New Deal programs, I'm screwed, she said, picking at her salad. Marcus leaned back in his chair, that smug smile spreading across his face. Don't worry, I've got you covered. What do you mean? Megan asked. Let's just say I have a friend in Peterson's 6th period, someone who's very good at taking notes. My blood went cold. 6th period was Peterson's planning period. No students. But there was a student aid program where seniors could help teachers with grading and filing during their free periods. I pulled out my phone and checked the school directory. Student aid assignments were public information available on the school website. I scrolled through the list for Peterson's class. There it was. Camden Lewis, Senior Aid, 6th Period Government. Camden. Quiet kid, invisible to most people, but I knew him from academic decathlon. He was smart but not confident. The kind of person who'd do favors for popular kids just to feel included. That afternoon, I positioned myself near Peterson's classroom during 6th period. Sure enough, I saw Camden leaving with a stack of papers that looked suspiciously like test materials. I followed him to his locker, watching as he made photocopies at the library machine before returning the originals. Then he met Marcus by the gym, sliding a manila envelope across like some kind of drug deal. My hands were shaking as I put the pieces together. Marcus wasn't just cheating on assignments, he was running an entire cheating ring. Camden was stealing tests and selling them. Marcus was distributing them to his inner circle and probably charging for the privilege. I could have gone to the administration right then. I had witnesses, patterns, evidence. But 4 years of being ignored had taught me something important. Adults don't listen to accusations. They listen to results. I needed something bigger. Something undeniable. Something that would catch them all at once and make it impossible for anyone to claim coincidence. That's when I remembered the AP Literature final exam. The big one. 25% of our final grade, and the results would factor directly into class rank calculations. It was the perfect target, but I couldn't just hope to catch them cheating on the real exam. I needed to create my own trap. The idea came to me during dinner that Thursday night. My mom was complaining about her coworker who'd been taking credit for her projects. Sometimes, she said, stirring her soup, you have to let people show their true colors. Give them enough rope to hang themselves. Rope. I could give Marcus all the rope he needed. I spent the next 3 days crafting the perfect fake exam. It had to look authentic. Same format as Peterson's previous tests, same question styles, official school letterhead that I recreated using design software. But every single answer key I created was wrong. Not obviously wrong, but subtly, consistently wrong in a way that would create a clear pattern. The genius part was the watermark. I embedded Marcus's student ID number into the document formatting, invisible to the naked eye, but detectable by anyone who knew where to look. Every copy, every distribution, every use of my fake exam would be traced directly back to him. I even included a few questions about topics we hadn't covered yet, things that would be impossible to know without access to teacher materials. Anyone using my fake exam would reveal that they had what they thought was advanced information. The hardest part was getting it to Marcus without arousing suspicion. I couldn't approach him directly. We barely spoke, and sudden contact would raise red flags. I needed an intermediary. Someone trustworthy enough that Marcus wouldn't question the source, but someone I could manipulate without them knowing. I chose Stephanie Walsh. Stephanie was perfect for this. She was friends with everyone, but close to no one, the kind of person who collected gossip and social currency. More importantly, she had a crush on Tyler that everyone knew about, which made her eager to do favors for Marcus's friend group. I approached her after calculus on Monday morning, 2 weeks before the exam. "Hey, Stephanie, can I ask you a huge favor?" I said, putting on my best helpless expression. "You know how I've been stressed about the AP Lit final?" She nodded sympathetically. Stephanie always loved being needed. "Well, my cousin goes to Eastwood High, and their AP teacher is friends with Peterson. She managed to get me a copy of a practice exam that's supposedly really similar to the real thing. But the thing is," I lowered my voice conspiratorially, "I feel weird having this advantage when other people don't." Stephanie's eyes lit up. This was exactly the kind of drama she lived for. I was thinking, I continued, maybe you could pass it along to some people who really need it? Level the playing field a little? But don't tell anyone it came from me. I don't want to get in trouble if teachers find out. Oh my God, Jessica, that's so sweet of you, she gushed. I know exactly who would appreciate this. Perfect. I handed her the manila envelope containing my masterpiece, watching as she practically skipped away with it. I knew exactly where it would end up. 3 days later, I watched Marcus laugh with his crew at lunch, probably celebrating their latest acquisition. By now, they'd all have copies of my fake exam. They'd be studying the wrong answers, preparing for questions that would never come, building their confidence on a foundation of lies. The beautiful part was that I didn't have to do anything else. Marcus's own system would do the rest. His arrogance, his network, his complete dependence on stolen information. It would all work against him. I spent the remaining days before the exam studying the actual material, preparing for the real test while Marcus and his friends memorized my carefully crafted fiction. Every night, I went to sleep knowing that their overconfidence was building, their guard dropping, their inevitable downfall approaching. The night before the exam, I allowed myself one moment of anticipation. Tomorrow, the truth would finally come to light. Tomorrow, 4 years of injustice would be corrected. Tomorrow, Marcus Wheeler would learn what happens when you steal from the wrong person. I smiled as I turned off my light. Chess players call it a sacrifice gambit. You give up something small to win something big. Marcus thought he was playing checkers, stealing test answers and assignment solutions like some small-time academic criminal. He had no idea he was playing against someone who'd been planning this checkmate for months. I woke up on exam day with the kind of calm that comes from perfect preparation. Not the kind of preparation Marcus thought he had, memorizing stolen answers and fake questions. Real preparation. I'd studied every poem we'd covered, every literary device, every essay technique Peterson had emphasized. While Marcus was building his confidence on my fabricated foundation, I was building mine on 4 years of actual work. The exam was scheduled for third period, which gave me 2 hours to watch the trap spring shut. First period was AP Biology. I sat 3 rows behind Tyler Brooks, watching his usual pre-test anxiety manifest in fidgeting and pencil tapping. Except today, he seemed different, relaxed, confident. He kept glancing at his phone and smirking, probably texting Marcus about how easy this was going to be. Second period was worse. I had study hall, which meant I could see the hallways through the classroom windows. Marcus walked past at least 3 times, and each time he had that same cocky swagger. He'd nod at people, flash that golden boy smile, play the part of the naturally brilliant student who didn't need to worry about silly things like tests. If only they knew. At 10:45, I made my way to Peterson's classroom. The desks were already arranged in testing formation, individual islands spaced apart to prevent cheating. The irony wasn't lost on me. All their precautions to stop students from looking at each other's papers when the real cheating had happened days ago. Marcus arrived exactly 3 minutes before the bell, because of course he did. Everything calculated to look effortless. He sat 2 rows over and 1 seat up from me, close enough that I could see his profile, the way his jaw was set with confidence instead of the tension everyone else was showing. Megan came in next, followed by Ashley and Tyler, the whole crew, probably feeling like they'd won the lottery. I wondered if they'd bothered to study anything legitimate, or if they'd put all their faith in my fake exam. Peterson began distributing test booklets at exactly 11. You have 2 hours and 15 minutes to complete this exam. No talking, no phones, no bathroom breaks unless it's an emergency. Begin when I say start. I opened my booklet and felt a rush of satisfaction. The real exam was nothing like my fake one. Different format, different question styles, covering material that wasn't anywhere in my fabricated version. Peterson had focused heavily on the poetry unit we'd finished just last week, stuff that Marcus and his friends probably never bothered to actually study. Question 1 asked us to analyze the use of imagery in William Carlos Williams' The Red Wheelbarrow. I smiled as I began writing. This poem had been in our textbook for months, but it wasn't covered in my fake exam. Marcus would have no idea how to approach it. I snuck a glance in his direction. The confident posture was already shifting. His pen wasn't moving as smoothly as it had been during the first few minutes. I could see the exact moment when he realized something was wrong. His shoulders tensed, and he flipped through the booklet pages faster, looking for familiar questions that weren't there. 20 minutes in, Tyler raised his hand for extra paper. That was unusual. Tyler never wrote more than the minimum required, unless he was panicking and trying to cover his confusion with quantity over quality. 30 minutes in, I caught Ashley erasing something aggressively enough that she nearly tore through her paper. Her face was flushed, and she kept glancing around the room like she was looking for answers that weren't coming. But Marcus was the most beautiful to watch. I'd positioned myself perfectly to see his profile, and I could track every emotion crossing his face. Confusion, frustration, growing panic. He kept touching his temple like he was trying to physically force the right answers to appear. The questions got harder as the exam progressed. Peterson had structured it like a pyramid: basic comprehension at the beginning, then deeper analysis, then synthesis and original thinking at the end. The kind of test that rewarded students who'd actually engaged with the material, not just memorized answer keys. Question 15 asked us to compare and contrast the themes of mortality in 3 different poems we'd studied, then create an original thesis about how these themes reflected broader cultural anxieties. It was exactly the kind of higher-order thinking that Marcus had never demonstrated in his original work. I watched him stare at the question for a full 5 minutes without writing anything. Meanwhile, I was in my element. Every question felt like coming home. This was what I'd trained for, what I'd earned through 4 years of legitimate work. My pen moved smoothly across the page, ideas flowing naturally from one to the next. Question 23 was the kill shot, though I didn't realize it at the time. It asked us to identify and analyze examples of plagiarism in literature, discussing how authors like T.S. Eliot and Shakespeare adapted existing works versus how modern plagiarism differs in intent and execution. The irony was so perfect, I almost laughed out loud. Marcus, who'd built his entire academic career on plagiarism, was being asked to write about the ethics and techniques of plagiarism. I crafted my response carefully, discussing how legitimate adaptation involves transformation and acknowledgement, while academic dishonesty involves deception and theft. I wrote about how plagiarism undermines not just individual achievement, but the entire system of educational trust. Every word was aimed directly at Marcus, even though he'd never realize it. With 30 minutes left, I finished my last essay and began reviewing my answers. I was confident in every response, backed by months of study and genuine understanding. Around me, I could hear the sounds of other students struggling, pages flipping frantically, erasers working overtime, the occasional frustrated sigh. Marcus had given up pretending to work. He was just sitting there, staring at his booklet like it was written in a foreign language. Which, in a way, it was. The language of actual learning, actual preparation, actual integrity. When Peterson called time, I felt like I was waking up from a beautiful dream. I'd just taken the test of my life, the performance that would secure my rightful place as valedictorian. But more than that, I'd just watched 4 years of injustice begin to correct itself. As we filed out of the classroom, I heard fragments of conversation that made my heart sing. "Dude, what the hell was that?" Tyler muttered to Marcus. "I don't know, man. That wasn't anything like..." Marcus stopped himself, probably remembering they were in public. Ashley was practically in tears. I studied so hard for this, and none of it was on there. If only she knew what she'd actually studied. The next few days passed in a blur of anticipation. Peterson had promised to grade the exams over the weekend and post results on Monday. That gave me 3 days to savor the knowledge of what was coming, while Marcus and his crew probably spent those same 3 days in growing dread. I used the time productively. I researched scholarship application deadlines, practiced my valedictorian speech, and started planning my summer reading list for college. All the things I should have been doing all along if I hadn't been robbed of my rightful position. Monday morning arrived with the weight of destiny. I got to school early, partly from excitement and partly from anxiety. This was it. 4 years of work culminating in one moment of truth. I walked past Peterson's classroom 3 times before first period, but the results weren't posted yet. During lunch, I finally saw a crowd gathered outside his door. My heart hammered as I approached, trying to look casual while internally screaming with anticipation. The exam scores were listed by student ID number, not names, but I knew Marcus's number by heart. I'd memorized it months ago when I was planning this moment. I found my number first, 97/100. An A+, exactly what I'd expected, exactly what I'd earned. Then I found Marcus's number, 23/100. An F, not just any F, but a catastrophic, undeniable, impossible to explain away F. But that wasn't the best part. The best part was the note at the bottom of the score sheet. Students who scored below 30% are required to meet with administration regarding academic integrity concerns. Please report to the principal's office immediately upon seeing this notice. I looked around the crowd for Marcus. He was standing about 10 feet away, his face completely drained of color. Tyler was next to him, looking equally devastated. Ashley was already crying. They'd all failed. Every single member of Marcus's cheating ring had scored below 30%. And thanks to my watermark system, their wrong answers would follow the exact same pattern, proving they'd all used the same fraudulent source. But I wasn't done yet. The fake exam was just the setup. The real masterpiece was what happened next. As Marcus walked toward the principal's office like a man heading to his execution, I pulled out my phone and opened the email I'd drafted 3 days ago. It contained every piece of evidence I'd collected over 4 years. Screenshots of Marcus's plagiarized work, photos of Camden passing test materials, a detailed timeline of their cheating operation, and most importantly, the original copy of my fake exam with the embedded watermark clearly visible. The subject line read, "Academic Integrity Violations Evidence Compilation, Urgent." I hit send. Principal Morrison would have everything she needed to connect the dots. The pattern of identical wrong answers, the watermark proving the source, the systematic nature of their cheating network. There would be no room for coincidence or misunderstanding this time. 20 minutes later, the intercom crackled to life. Camden Lewis, Tyler Brooks, Ashley Romano, and Megan Foster, please report to the principal's office immediately. I smiled as I watched them file out of their respective classrooms. The whole network called in one by one. It was better than I dared to hope. By the end of the day, the rumors were flying. Cheating scandal, multiple suspensions, investigation ongoing. The details were fuzzy, but the outcome was clear. Marcus Wheeler's reign was over. I went home that afternoon and did something I hadn't done in 4 years. I relaxed, really, truly relaxed. The burden of carrying this secret, this plan, this righteous anger, it was finally lifting. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You did this." Marcus. Somehow he'd figured it out. Somehow he knew. I stared at the message for a long time, considering how to respond. Part of me wanted to deny it, to maintain plausible deniability. Part of me wanted to gloat, to finally tell him exactly what I thought of his 4 years of theft and lies. In the end, I went with something simpler. Prove it. He never responded. 2 days later, the official announcement came. Marcus Wheeler and his associates had been suspended for academic dishonesty. Their grades were being reviewed, going back 2 semesters. College admissions offices were being notified, and Jessica Chen was now ranked number 1 in the senior class. Valedictorian. Finally. The aftermath was more beautiful than I'd ever imagined. Within 48 hours of the suspension announcement, Marcus Wheeler went from golden boy to pariah. The same hallways where he'd strutted with confidence became hostile territory. Students who'd envied him now whispered behind his back. Teachers who'd favored him suddenly remembered every suspicious assignment, every too perfect test score, every red flag they'd ignored. But the real satisfaction came from watching the systematic collapse of everything he'd built on lies. His college acceptance to Northwestern, contingent on maintaining his GPA and class rank, was rescinded within a week. The admissions office received a detailed report about the cheating scandal, along with documentation of his academic dishonesty going back 2 years. 4 years of stolen achievements crumbled in a single phone call. The scholarship offers disappeared next. The merit-based awards, the leadership recognitions, the outstanding student honors, all of them had clauses about academic integrity. Marcus's parents had to liquidate their vacation fund just to afford state school tuition, and even then, most universities put his applications on hold pending the investigation. Tyler and Ashley faced similar consequences, but Megan's punishment was the most poetic. She'd been accepted to the same competitive journalism program I'd applied to, a program that only took 12 students nationwide. When they revoked her admission for academic dishonesty, guess who got called off the waiting list? Camden, surprisingly, became a star witness. Faced with expulsion, he broke down and confessed everything to Principal Morrison. The test theft, the payment system, the whole network. In exchange for cooperation, he got suspended instead of expelled, but his reputation was destroyed. The quiet kid who just wanted to belong had learned the hardest way possible, that some prices are too high to pay for acceptance. I watched it all unfold with the satisfaction of a master architect, seeing her blueprint come to life. The best part was graduation day itself. I stood at the podium in my white dress, looking out at a sea of faces that included my beaming parents, my proud teachers, and scattered throughout the crowd, the wreckage of Marcus's former empire. Tyler sat with his family near the back, wearing a regular cap and gown instead of the honor cords he'd expected. Ashley had transferred schools and wasn't there at all. Camden was in the audience, but wouldn't be walking across the stage. And Marcus? Marcus was working at his uncle's auto shop instead of preparing for freshman orientation at Northwestern. My valedictorian speech was everything I dreamed it would be. I talked about integrity, perseverance, the importance of earning your achievements through honest work. Every word was carefully chosen, every sentiment genuine. I spoke about how success built on lies ultimately collapses, how the truth always finds a way to surface. Character, I said, looking directly at the section where Marcus's family sat, is what you do when no one is watching. It's the foundation that supports every real achievement in your life. The applause was thunderous. 4 years of legitimate work, recognized at last. But the revenge wasn't complete yet. The final act came 3 months later, during my freshman year at college. I was scrolling through Reddit during a study break when I saw a writing prompt about high school revenge stories. Something clicked. All the satisfaction I'd felt from seeing Marcus's downfall, all the validation from finally being recognized for my real achievements. It felt incomplete somehow, like there was one more chapter waiting to be written. So I wrote it. I created a throwaway account and titled the post, I exposed my entire high school's cheating ring and became valedictorian by setting the perfect trap. The story poured out of me in vivid detail. Every step of my plan, every moment of satisfaction, every consequence that had rippled through our school community. I changed names and identifying details, but the core of it was absolutely true. I posted it late on a Sunday night and went to sleep without expecting much response. I woke up to 15,000 upvotes and counting. The comments were everything I'd hoped for and more. Hundreds of people calling me a genius. Thousands sharing their own stories of academic injustice. Award after award being given to my post. It was spreading across other platforms, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook. People were calling it the greatest revenge story they'd ever read. But the best comment came from u/TruthSeeker2019. Holy shit, I think I know exactly who this is. I went to Westfield High, graduated in 2019. Marcus Wheeler was the golden boy until he got exposed senior year. This girl, Jessica Chen, became valedictorian after he got suspended. This is 100% real, and it was legendary. Marcus tried to appeal the decision, but the evidence was too overwhelming. Last I heard, he was working at his uncle's auto shop, and Jessica got into Harvard early admission. Harvard. I smiled at that detail. Close enough. I'd gotten into my dream school with the full scholarship that came with being valedictorian. The story exploded from there. It got picked up by BuzzFeed, then local news stations. Someone created a TikTok series acting out the key moments. A YouTube channel did a dramatic reading that got 3 million views. It became internet legend. And through it all, I remained anonymous. Jessica Chen, Harvard freshman, honor student, future law school candidate. Clean reputation, bright future, no connection to the viral revenge story that had captivated the internet. But Marcus Wheeler? Marcus Wheeler's real name was still attached to the scandal. Anyone who Googled him would find news articles about the cheating ring, Reddit threads analyzing his downfall, social media posts calling him an example of what happens to academic cheaters. My revenge had evolved beyond anything I'd originally planned. It wasn't just about getting valedictorian or exposing his lies. It had become a permanent part of internet culture, a cautionary tale that would follow him forever. The beautiful irony was that Marcus had always wanted to be famous. Star quarterback, popular kid, the guy everyone knew and admired. Now he was famous, just not in the way he'd hoped. Every few months, the story would resurface. Someone would repost it, or a YouTuber would discover it, or it would trend on a new platform. Each time, Marcus Wheeler's name came up in the comments, shared by classmates who remembered the real events. I graduated summa cum laude from college. Marcus dropped out of community college after 1 semester. I got into law school with full funding. Marcus got fired from 3 different jobs when employers Googled his name and found the story. I built a career based on my actual talents and honest work. Marcus's reputation never recovered from the foundation of lies he'd constructed in high school. 5 years after graduation, I was a successful lawyer working for a prestigious firm in Manhattan. I had my own apartment, a respectable savings account, and a career trajectory that excited me every day. Marcus was still living with his parents, still bouncing between minimum wage jobs, still dealing with the consequences of decisions he'd made as a teenager. The revenge was complete, but more than that, it was perfect. I hadn't just exposed him. I'd made him a permanent example. Every time someone wanted to tell a story about poetic justice, about smart girls getting their revenge, about cheaters getting what they deserved, they told my story. And the best part, I'd never broken a single rule. Everything I'd done was perfectly legal, perfectly ethical, perfectly justified. I'd used Marcus's own dishonesty against him, turned his system into his downfall, made his character flaws into his destruction. I'd won by being better than him. Not just smarter, not just more prepared, but genuinely, fundamentally better. That was the revenge Marcus Wheeler never saw coming. Not just that he'd get caught, but that he'd get replaced by someone who actually deserved what he'd been stealing. 7 years later, I was sitting in my Manhattan office reviewing depositions when my assistant buzzed in. "Miss Chen, there's a Marcus Wheeler on line 3. Says he went to high school with you." My pen stopped moving. 7 years. 7 years since I'd heard that name spoken aloud in my presence. "Put him through," I said. "Jessica?" His voice was different. Smaller somehow. The confidence that had once made teachers blush and students follow was completely gone. "Hello, Marcus." I kept my tone neutral, professional. I saw your name in the news. That corporate fraud case you won last month. I guess congratulations are in order." "Thank you." I wasn't going to make this easy for him. There was a long pause. "Listen, I was wondering if we could meet. I'm in the city for a job interview, and I thought maybe we could talk about high school, about what happened." I almost laughed. 7 years too late, he wanted to talk. "I'm quite busy, Marcus. What exactly did you want to discuss?" Another pause. "I know it was you, the fake exam, the whole thing. I've always known." "That's quite an accusation. Do you have any proof?" "No," he said quietly, "but I know, and I wanted to tell you. I wanted to say that I deserved it. Everything that happened, I deserved all of it. This was interesting. Go on." I was 18 and stupid, and I thought I was untouchable. I thought I could cheat and lie and steal my way through everything, and no one would ever call me on it. But you did. You destroyed me, and I deserved to be destroyed. I set down my pen and leaned back in my chair. This conversation was not going where I'd expected. "Why are you calling me, Marcus?" "Because I want to thank you." Now I was genuinely surprised. "Thank you?" "The last 7 years have been hell," he said. Losing Northwestern, working dead-end jobs, having that story follow me everywhere I go. But you know what the worst part was? It wasn't the consequences. It was knowing that you were right, knowing that I was everything you said I was. A cheater, a liar, someone who stole other people's work and took credit for it. He took a shaky breath. But about 2 years ago, I started going to therapy, started really looking at who I was and why I'd made those choices, and I realized something. You didn't destroy my life. You saved it. Explain. I was on a path that would have led to worse things. Bigger lies, bigger consequences. If I'd gotten away with it in high school, I would have done it in college. If I'd gotten away with it in college, I would have done it in my career. You stopped me before I could do real damage to real people. I was quiet for a long moment, processing this unexpected turn. I'm in AA now, Marcus continued. Not for drinking, but they have programs for other kinds of addiction. Lying, cheating, the need to take shortcuts instead of doing the work, and part of the process is making amends to people you've hurt. You think you hurt me? I stole 4 years of recognition that should have been yours. I made you doubt yourself, made you feel invisible, made you watch someone else get credit for being what you actually were. Yeah, I hurt you, and I'm sorry. The apology I'd never expected to hear, coming 7 years too late to matter, but somehow still meaningful. What do you want from me, Marcus? Nothing, he said. I don't want forgiveness. I don't want us to be friends. I just wanted you to know that you were right about everything. And that in a weird way, you did me the biggest favor anyone's ever done for me. You forced me to face who I really was. After he hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. 7 years of carrying this story, of watching his downfall from a distance, of feeling satisfied every time the Reddit post resurfaced or someone shared the tale of academic revenge. And now this. Closure I hadn't known I needed. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I Googled Marcus Wheeler. The old articles were still there, the Reddit story still legendary, the cautionary tale still being shared. But buried deeper in the search results, I found newer information. Marcus Wheeler, substance abuse counselor. Marcus Wheeler, speaking at high schools about academic integrity. Marcus Wheeler, running support groups for people struggling with honesty and addiction. He'd built something new from the wreckage of what I'd destroyed. Not the golden boy he'd pretended to be, but something real. Something earned through actual struggle and genuine change. I felt a strange emotion I couldn't quite identify. Not satisfaction, not vindication. Something more complex. Maybe it was completion. 2 weeks later, I got an email from a high school student in Ohio. She'd read my story online and was dealing with her own plagiarizing classmate. She wanted advice on how to handle it. I found myself writing back, not with instructions for revenge, but with encouragement to trust the system, to focus on her own excellence, to let integrity be its own reward. Over the following months, more emails came. Students dealing with cheaters, teachers struggling with academic dishonesty, parents whose children had been hurt by unfair systems. My story had become more than entertainment. It had become inspiration for people fighting their own battles against injustice. But something had shifted in how I viewed it all. The 18-year-old Jessica, who'd crafted that elaborate trap, had been driven by righteous anger and a thirst for justice. She'd wanted recognition, vindication, revenge. She'd gotten all three in spectacular fashion. The 25-year-old Jessica sitting in her Manhattan office understood something different. The best revenge had never been Marcus's downfall. It had been becoming exactly who I was meant to be. I was a successful lawyer because I'd learned to work harder than everyone else. I was respected because I'd built my reputation on actual achievements. I was happy because I'd never compromised my integrity for shortcuts. Marcus's cheating had tried to steal my future. My response had secured it instead. That weekend, I did something I'd never thought I'd do. I created a new Reddit account and posted an update to my legendary story. 7 years later, an update from the girl who exposed the cheating ring. I wrote about Marcus's call, about his transformation, about the emails from students seeking advice. I wrote about how revenge, even perfectly executed revenge, is ultimately less satisfying than simply becoming your best self. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of comments, hundreds of awards, messages from people saying the update was even better than the original story. But the comment that stayed with me came from Ooh Second Chances 2024. This is why your story became legendary. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about integrity winning in the end. Thank you for showing us what that looks like. 3 months later, I was invited to speak at my old high school's graduation ceremony. Principal Morrison, now nearing retirement, had specifically requested me as the keynote speaker. "You represent everything we want our students to understand about achievement," she told me during our planning call. Success built on real foundation, not shortcuts. The irony wasn't lost on me. 7 years ago, I'd given a valedictorian speech to an audience that included Marcus's devastated family. Now I was returning as the guest of honor, invited to inspire a new generation of students. I spent weeks crafting that speech, thinking about what I wanted to say to 18-year-olds facing the same pressures and temptations I'd once navigated. Graduation day was perfect, sunny and warm with that electric energy that comes from young people on the verge of their futures. As I looked out at the sea of caps and gowns, I spotted familiar faces in the audience. Some of my old teachers, parents of former classmates, and in the back row, almost hidden, Marcus. He wasn't supposed to be there. He had no connection to this graduating class, no reason to attend. But there he was, listening intently as I began to speak. 7 years ago, I stood on this same stage and gave a speech about integrity. I began. Today, I want to talk to you about something more important, the difference between winning and succeeding. I told them about the temptation to take shortcuts, about the hollow victory that comes from achievements built on lies. I talked about the long-term cost of compromising your character for short-term gains. But I also talked about redemption, about second chances, about the possibility of rebuilding yourself on a foundation of truth, even after you've made terrible mistakes. Some of you will cheat, I said, looking directly at the students. Some of you will lie, or steal credit, or take the easy path when the hard path would serve you better. When that happens, not if, but when, remember that your mistakes don't have to define your entire life. You can choose to be better. You can choose to start over. As I spoke those words, I saw Marcus in the back row wipe his eyes. After the ceremony, he approached me in the parking lot. "Thank you," he said simply, "for what you said in there about second chances." "Everyone deserves a chance to become who they're meant to be," I replied. "Even people who make terrible mistakes at 18. He smiled, the first genuine smile I'd ever seen from him. "You know, I applied to law school, taking the LSAT next month." "That's wonderful, Marcus. I mean that. I probably won't get in anywhere good. My undergraduate record is complicated, but I'm going to try. The right way this time. The right way is the only way that matters," I told him. As I drove away from Westfield High that day, I thought about the strange journey that had brought me full circle. The angry 18-year-old who'd plotted elaborate revenge had grown into someone who understood that the best victory is becoming your best self. Marcus Wheeler had tried to steal my future. Instead, he'd given me the motivation to build something even better than what I'd originally planned. The cheating scandal had made me valedictorian. But my response to it, the years of hard work, the commitment to integrity, the refusal to let someone else's dishonesty diminish my own character, that had made me successful. That night, I updated my LinkedIn profile with a new tagline, "Success is best served honestly." Within hours, I had messages from former classmates, colleagues, and strangers who'd read my story online. They wanted to work with me, learn from me, hire me. Not because I was the girl who'd gotten perfect revenge, but because I was someone who turned adversity into achievement through sheer determination and unwavering integrity. 6 months later, Marcus Wheeler was accepted to a mid-tier law school with a partial scholarship based on his community service work and personal statement about overcoming past mistakes. He sent me a simple text. "Thank you for showing me what integrity looks like." I saved that message, not as a trophy of victory, but as a reminder of something I'd learned. The best revenge is becoming so successful, so genuinely accomplished, so unshakably confident in your own worth, that your former enemies become inspired by your example instead of destroyed by your wrath. 10 years after graduation, the Reddit story still circulates. People still call it legendary, still share it as the perfect example of academic revenge. But now when I read those comments, I smile for different reasons. They're not celebrating my ability to destroy someone who'd wronged me. They're celebrating the idea that integrity ultimately wins, that hard work pays off, that truth has a way of surfacing no matter how deeply it's buried. Marcus Wheeler tried to steal my story. Instead, he became a supporting character in the greatest story I could have written. The story of a girl who refused to let someone else's dishonesty compromise her own character, who turned betrayal into motivation, and who built a life so successful and fulfilling that revenge became irrelevant. The 18-year-old Jessica had wanted to see Marcus Wheeler destroyed. The 28-year-old Jessica was proud to have watched him rebuild himself into someone worth respecting. That, I realized, was the most beautiful ending of all. As I finished typing my final update to the Reddit story, I smiled and hit publish. The last line read, "Sometimes the best revenge is simply living so well that your enemies become inspired to be better people, and that's a victory worth celebrating." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of upvotes, hundreds of comments calling it the perfect conclusion to the saga. But the message that mattered most came from an account I recognized, u/MarcusW Redemption Arc. "Thank you for giving me the chance to become someone worth forgiving. Law school starts in the fall. I'm going to make you proud." I typed back, "You already have." And I meant it.